It's time now for a look at the day's business news with Stephen Carroll. Stephen, following that testimony of Frances Haugen, you've been looking at some of the potential regulations that Facebook could have to face.
Frances Haugen's message to lawmakers was very clear that the time has come to change the rules around how companies like Facebook are governed. She said that new rules were needed because the severity of this crisis demands that we break out, in her words, a regulatory frame. Senator Amy Klobuchar described Haugen's testimony as a catalyst for action. Now, lawmakers already have plenty of options to pursue in this area. Firstly, using antitrust or competition laws, looking at the question of, does Facebook's dominance in social media mean that it's a monopoly? That's something currently being investigated by the Federal Trade Commission. They're taking a case against the company at the moment that's going through the courts. There have also been proposals put forward to update those antitrust laws to target the power, particularly of technology companies like Facebook. Congress has also introduced several bills regulating people's privacy on platforms like Facebook. That's something that could be expanded further as well. There's been a lot of talk too about Section 230. Section 230, which is part of the Communications Decency Act, which shields tech companies from being sued over content that's published by the users of those platforms. Frances Haugen suggests that that could be tweaked to distinguish between content that's just posted or things that companies are actively promoting on people's news feeds by their algorithms. She also argues that to deal with any of these issues, regulators must have access to internal data from these companies to show how their algorithms work.
And Stephen, what does Facebook have to say in response to all of this?
Well, the company has been trying to downplay Haugen's importance in the company and also her knowledge of how Facebook works. In a statement, though, its policy communications director said they did agree on one thing, that it's time to create standard rules for the internet. It's been 25 years since the rules for the internet have been updated, and instead of expecting the industry to make societal decisions, that belongs to legislators, and they're saying it's time for Congress to act as well. That's something that's easier said than done. This has been an issue for many years now. We haven't seen big changes in regulation during that time. Lawmakers have acknowledged too that previous attempts to regulate big tech have led to intense lobbying by those companies on Capitol Hill as well. And that, of course, makes the job very difficult too.
And Stephen, what about the markets? How have they been reacting to Haugen's testimony?
Facebook shares were up by 2% in trading on Wall Street yesterday. Now, that's after the sharp fall that they'd seen on Monday. The company's shares are currently about 13% lower than the peak that they hit a month ago. More broadly on the markets today, we've got Asian shares trading in the red. No major reaction in Hong Kong to CEO Carrie Lam's policy speech that's happening at the moment. Shanghai markets are still closed for trading.
And next, Stephen, to the latest update on the world economy from the International Monetary Fund.
The IMF is going to reduce its forecast for global economic growth next week. In July, it had expected expansion of 6% this year, but the fund now says that risks around issues like debt and inflation linked to the pandemic have forced it to scale back its forecast. IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva says the main obstacle facing the world is the vaccination divide between rich and poor countries. She also says the issue of increased debt shouldn't spark another crisis.
We are already seeing countries recognizing that the bills are going to come due, and that it is important that we gradually project confidence in that stabilization. And fiscal consolidation need not mean that we are going to have brutal cuts in education and healthcare.
Here in France, the hospitality industry is looking at new ways to attract workers. There are more than 100,000 jobs open in the sector, which is hampering its recovery from the lockdowns earlier this year. Unions say employers need to pay up to 8% more and revise working conditions as well. Maria Sofas reports.
This restaurant in Bordeaux has a number of job vacancies, but they simply aren't getting filled. It's the same situation across the board in bars, restaurants, cafes and hotels throughout France. In order to attract candidates, the sector's main union is asking for a minimum wage increase of up to 9%, the introduction of a 13th month bonus and one weekend off every month.
Ça nous permettrait de pouvoir vivre déjà un peu mieux et d'avoir plus de motivation à venir le matin travailler.
Moi, j'avais arrêté la restauration pour avoir une vie de famille. Et j'ai pu repartir dans la restauration parce qu'on m'a proposé des contrats où je ne travaillais pas les soirs et où je pouvais combiner vie de famille en fait, et travail.
There are currently over 100,000 job vacancies in the French hospitality sector that aren't being picked up. It's a recurring problem, and union officials say it's been going on for too long.
On ne peut pas non plus chaque année partager le même constat de dire il y a 200 000 offres d'emploi, 100 000 offres d'emploi non pourvues, etc. De façon récurrente, ça fait 10 ans, c'est accéléré pour la période de Covid. Donc à un moment donné, il faut se poser les bonnes questions.
It's unclear whether the union proposals would be enough to attract job seekers, though. Meetings are set to take place this week, and negotiations are expected to last until the end of the year.
Well, as debate continues in the United States, Stephen, over raising the government's borrowing limit, there's an unusual idea to fix the problem that's getting a lot of attention.
This is the idea of a $1 trillion coin. Now, the idea is that the president can legally tell the Treasury Secretary to mint a $1 trillion coin that could then be deposited in the Federal Reserve to cover a big portion of Washington's bills. It is technically allowed under a 1997 law that allows the Treasury Secretary to authorise a platinum coin at a value of his or her discretion. Now, the idea has been largely criticised by economists as an accounting gimmick, but as the journalist Josh Boak explains, it's a nice idea.
And economically, it's kind of an elegant solution. Politically, it is something of a potential disaster, which is why both Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki have said the Biden administration will not be minting the coin.
I think we can safely say there will not be a $1 trillion coin that will solve this problem.
Sounds like a nice idea, but yeah, probably not. Stephen Carroll, thank you for that business update.